Once again, who I am, not important. What I have to say, still subjective, but I think it's something you should consider. So once again, G-Man wants to know about morality, objective morality. And I'm going to try and explain one more time about how I feel the Bible is a book of metaphors, handed down from generation to generation, not the law. It's pretty clear to me that this has become more of a competition than a journey to try and give civilization, humanity, some type of pathway to follow, something that's a little clearer, something that gives us some guidelines as to how to negotiate this world and what tools we need to get through it the best we can. Look, I think we all can agree we're stuck on this planet together, so we ought to make the best of it. And arguing about what can never be decided, the Kobayashi Maru, I think is a bit futile. So why don't we try and get along and make another plan and do something a little different for humanity? It seems quite absurd that we will beg the sky for things that we already do and are responsible for, and that we'll do it year after year, millennia after millennia, to no answer. Why can't we acknowledge that we do this? Why is that such a bad thing? If we take responsibility for each other, we take pride in each other, and we care for each other as we're supposed to. The road we've traveled through humanity has been long, and hopefully we still have a long road to travel. It might be nice if we stop fighting each other and realize that only through caring for each other, respecting each other, and teaching each other ways to cope and to lessen the burden can we succeed as a society. So I've just gone through hours of editing, and I just scrapped it all because ultimately I'm just rambling incoherently. I mean, I get it, but I don't think that I'm able to articulate it quite efficiently enough. The stories of the Bible are metaphors. They're lessons to be learned. God didn't set up Adam and Eve for the fall because they were bad. These are stories that date back before Judaism, possibly even farther, based on the way they're structured. And it's about humans becoming conscious and self-aware. That's that metaphor, that they are all of a sudden aware that they're not just regular animals anymore, right? They start thinking about, oh, that I have a cause. There's a cause and effect in what I do, and I caused that, and oh, that gave me that outcome. Maybe I shouldn't do that again. Next time I'm going to do this, right? So these things evolve over many, many hundreds and thousands of years. It's not just one day that God gives a command. The God concept is merely something that is bigger than all of us humans, and that is the relationship that we have with each other in whatever form that is. When Nietzsche said that God was dead and we killed him and we had the blood on our hands, he wasn't happy about this, right? You'd think that philosophers, maybe they're secular, and it didn't really matter whether they were secular or not. Nietzsche knew that we would be in trouble as a society if we didn't have something to believe in. And I think we've seen that over and over again throughout history. So it's time that we start heeding some of the warnings that the people that came before us have taught us. The first 3 stories in the Bible are so important. They're foundational, right? It's how we've come into consciousness what those things mean to us, figuring out that we're naked just is a vulnerability. That's all that is. And when you're vulnerable, then you're not going to tempt fate so much, right? You're not going to you're going to realize that you have limits. And then in now acknowledging that you're human and you've got some kind of consciousness and self-consciousness, you need to prepare, right? You're not just some animal in a field anymore. Now you're a human and you've got duties. That's why naming the animals is naming things. It makes them real. Even in therapy today, they have you name what's going on. You have to name your issue. You're angry or whatever. It makes it real. It's the same concept. When you create culture, when you put clothes on, you're creating culture, and you're not going to tempt fate so much. It's kind of like when you're surfing. You hear surfers talk about respecting the wave, things that are bigger than you. Mm-hmm. The relationship between people. It's not that those two people are less important, but how you foster that relationship is really important. Marriage is a really good example of that, right? The two people are, of course, in it, but it is the marriage itself, because these two are flawed. They're messed up. They always have been, always will be, right? But it's two people that say, okay, we can tolerate each other, but we're staying. If you commit with me, if you get married with me, then you commit to sticking around, right? That's the thing that's supposed to be worshipped, is that bond between all of us. That's supposed to be divine. Cain and Abel talks about sacrifice and our decisions. It's kind of a reaction to what we learn as Adam and Eve, and that even though he gets away with killing his brother, he's not really punished for it. The rest of the story goes on to say that, look, this man is not punished for what he did, and so it eats away at him, right? And so if you insult somebody from his family, you'll get it 7 times over, and then again, if it happens again, 7 times 70. It just means that we throw our generational dysfunction down through the ages if we don't fix them, if we don't correct them, if we don't handle them properly. If somebody does something wrong, we need to correct it, not just by punishing them, but making sure that it never happens again. Because a man who carries a burden like that, a person, a human that carries a burden like that, is not going to operate in a straight line anymore, because it's going to erode their confidence, their self-image, all of those things. Certainly the flood tells you that if you don't keep your life in order, if you don't take care of what you're supposed to, keeping the foundation of the house, make sure that it's stable, make sure that you have enough food, make sure that you take care of, crops or whatever it is that you need to have to be prepared. That if you don't do that, a storm will come, and metaphorical storm or a real one, right? Like Louisiana saw a real storm. They were warned that their levees were not sufficient. Holland has the same type of situation. They also live underneath or below the sea level, yet they built their levees. They say that they can withstand storms. Maybe one every 10,000 years will come by and will be able to destroy their levees. But Louisiana didn't listen. They cut corners and they misappropriated funds, and they didn't heed the warning, and that's what they got. And it wasn't because they're filthy heathens or that they were displeasing God. They just broke the rule that was handed down throughout the ages. Look, they said, hey, we've seen it before. We've seen people who did not pay attention to what happened before them, and there that goes. Now your ship's gone, and you were warned. And that also speaks to our responsibility. We'll blame a lot of things on a lot of different people, but if you sit down and look at most problems, they were avoidable by that particular person who's saying, it's not my fault. Yeah, it was your fault. This was your responsibility. You chose not to be responsible for it. That's your choice. You don't want to be responsible for it, that's fine. But that still doesn't negate the fact that it was your responsibility, and this is what you get. So, look, every time somebody dies, the closer we are to that person, the more of an impact we feel. And that universally, people of sound mind feel grief when somebody dies. That's objective. We know that people are born. That's objective. We all know it. We just, because it happens. We know this. People die. It's objective. We know this. And everything in between has developed over millions of years. So it's not about who did what. It's not about whether Christians are more moral than atheists. It's about our humans doing what's necessary to make every generation better as we go on. There's so much information out there. There's so much history. There's so many writings from all walks of life that warn us of what is good and what is bad, and what is helpful and what is hindering. And if we were smart, we would be taking the good and bringing it forward with us and leaving the bad and advising those who are with us. Hey, remember we did this in the past. It didn't turn out well. We're not doing that again. But this did work. And hey, by the way, those guys over there, they got something that works too. I think we can incorporate it into what we're doing. Humans have been battling between the good and the bad that is within each and every person since the very beginning. That is the whole metaphor of God and the devil. It's that is good and that is bad. I mean, all the people that have done evil things in the world, sure, there's a few that stand out, the Hitlers, the Maos, the Stalins, but they had lots of people around them helping them, right? Everybody who's been a part of a government that has been corrupt, right down to the people who work in corporations that send money offshore to avoid taxes that we could use to better our society. They participate in what is not helpful for humanity. Those who perpetuate racism or sexism, which I don't even know where to go on that one. There's so many stories out there, so many myths. And they're not even, to use the word myth is to, we define that as something different, right? Myth means it was never real. Well, they weren't real, but they were stories that were passed on because that's how they described them to each other. That's how they taught each other the lessons because they weren't as psychologically and linguistically sophisticated. So this is all they had. But we have these things now. At least we're supposed to have them. We need to stop. You can believe what you want, but let's stop trying to convince each other that the other is right or wrong or stupid. It's not doing us any good, and it's distracting us from the fact that we're voting for bad politicians that are making bad global decisions, and it looks like we don't have a whole lot more time because I don't know if anybody's noticed, we're quite vulnerable right now. So there isn't a whole lot more I can tell you. because it's just my experience. I never hated religion or hated God. As a matter of fact, I never even had feelings about them at all until I came here and got told I was immoral, liar, a whore. Shit, nobody's had less sex than me. I I don't quite get the benefit. Why some of us, despite what they've been through, despite being abused by people that were supposed to love you, despite taking your life down roads where you made every mistake, where you witnessed atrocities, you witnessed people killing each other, you witnessed people dying for no reason, senselessly. How some can still want what's best for society. How one can wake up every day and fight their own demons and still have room to want to make sure that other people have what they need as well. I think we all have it in us. I know we do. We just have to admit that we also have the bad in us, that we also have the ability to be selfish, self-centered, and that when we're hurt, we lash out and we don't act appropriately, blame others, choose to ignore things that would be beneficial if we didn't ignore them. We have to look at things how they really are and realize that our government does not do good things to other people. We are not the heroes that we think we are, despite the fact that we still may have a pretty good living situation. We are not at all innocent as long as we continue to act as if our right to vote was worded as an option. Well, that's your option to vote if you want. It's not what it was given to us for. It's our right to vote. It is the only way that we have in this huge society to make our voices heard, and we must accept the fact that the majority rules. If we don't like the way a democratic republic works, then I guess it's time to change. Okay, let's see what we have. We got communism. Anybody? Communism? Anyone? No? Okay. Socialism? Well, we know how that goes over. Okay. I don't know, you want to blow ourselves back into the Middle Ages and we can start all over again? What is it that you want, humanity? What do you want? Because we can't all have everything. Laws cannot be written to suit us all, which is why freedom is so good. But freedom requires us to take care of ourselves. Freedom requires us to be strong enough to weather insults, bigotry, racism, sexism. We have to be big boys and girls. And if we continue to give our governments all the right to manage what is logically unmanageable, there is no way to meet everybody's needs. And I don't give a shit about who's got privilege. You make what you can out of this life. If you don't like it, you know what? I'm never going to get my first 50 years back. I don't get it back. So I either have to make a decision that I can just fuck the rest of it and say, that's it. If I don't have a good time, if I don't have a good life, nobody else is having a good life. That's not right. I have to accept the fact that I'm going to have to sacrifice my apology, my reparation for the abuse that I got. I just have to accept that. Because in the scheme of things, I'm going to live the rest of my life, and I'm going to make the best out of it that I can. I'm going to make sure that I don't pass on what was done to me to anybody else. And I've already done that as a parent. I've never laid a hand on my children. They had to learn through other means, the proper means, cause and effect. Well, looks like you're not going to get that then. You screwed up there, so you just can't have that. And then you stick to it. We see that giving into our own pain for our own selfish pleasures and not rising above it is not getting us anything good. Pointing fingers doesn't fix the problem. Assigning blame. And how can you assign blame to a certain thing? It's like the patriarchy. What the fuck is that? There's women that work out there in industry. There's women who support ideas, women who vote, women. It's just bad people. And women are going crazy right now because they know, their DNA knows that they are abandoning their job. I mean, if you take a look at the Adam and Eve story, once humanity becomes conscious, there are certain things that they must know, right? That the male, because of his position in the world, is required to work. He can't just be some lazy animal in the field anymore. He's got a conscience. He's got a conscience. He is aware. He's self-aware. He understands that if he does this, that will happen. That's the morality that just is inherent in us. And then we learn subjectively more. It's both. He's going to be responsible for those things. She, by no fault of her own, is going to bear the children. And because human children have bigger heads, there's pain. And because human children are dependent for much longer than any other animal is dependent on their parent, she must care for them. Because she is burdened with that, I hate that word, he is going to work and take care of her. He knows that he cannot take advantage of her when she is vulnerable, and she knows that she's having to relinquish to him when she is most vulnerable. So it doesn't benefit either of them to screw the other one over. And there is the thought that the original sin was not the fact that she ate the apple. It was the fact that they both knew the rules and they broke them, and he blamed it on her. Now, that doesn't make men bad. That story, see, it's funny, they came up with these stories to describe life to very simple people back then, but yet here we are, these modern people, and we get the story wrong. Right? We happen to have men and women. That story could have been about two men or two women, but when a group knows what is right and what is wrong, and they choose to do wrong, and then they point the fingers and say it's that person's fault, it's that person's fault. That's the sin. That's the original sin. And the original word, or I think it's the Hebrew word for sin, it's not what we think it is. It simply is translated into missing the mark. You miss the mark. That's a whole lot different than you're a sinner and all that brings with it. These beautiful stories and lessons were just trashed by humans who wanted to dominate, to control. How is it that you don't see that? I don't get it. None of us are the enemy, and all of us are the enemy. We need to suck it up, buttercups. We're human. We're each other's gods. Yeah. Oh, you think you're God? Well, I'm your God and you're my God. So kind of evens out. Seems so logical. Bonehead like me can figure it out. Surely the rest of you can.